Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 708 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 141, House Resolution 708. Resolved that if House Report 112-546 is called up by direction of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, A, all points of order against the report are waived and the report shall be considered as read, and B1, an accompanying resolution offered by direction of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform shall be considered as read and shall not be subject to point of order, and 2, the previous question shall be considered as ordered on such resolution to adoption without intervening motion or demand for division of the question except I, 50 minutes of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform or their respective designees, double I. After conclusion of debate, one motion to refer, if offered by Representative Dingell of Michigan or his designee, which shall be separately debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, and triple I. One motion to recommit with or without instructions. The chair may reduce to minimum time for electronic voting on the question of adoption of the motion to recommit as though pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20. Section 2. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order without intervention of any point of order to consider in the House the resolution, House Resolution 706, authorizing the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to initiate or intervene in judicial proceedings to enforce certain subpoenas. The resolution shall be considered as read. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the resolution to adoption without intervening motion or demand for division of the question except 1. 20 minutes of debate equally divided and controlled by the majority leader and the minority leader or their respective designees, and 2, one motion to recommit.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts and my colleague on the Rules Committee, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of the resolution, all time yielded is for purposes of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying resolution that brings the House to this House floor. The rule provides for consideration of 2 contempt of Congress charges laid against Attorney General Eric Holder. You're going to hear a lot of folks say how historic today is. This historicness is why the rule provides for debate and separate votes on the contempt charges. The rule also provides for a motion to refer the criminal contempt charges, if offered by Mr. Dingell, as well as motions to recommit both resolutions. I don't assume to put words in his mouth, but I'm sure and I'm willing to bet that Mr. McGovern's sitting over there getting ready to tell me it's not enough time. I'm not going to disagree, because as we all know, before we leave Friday evening to go to work in our districts, we have a lot to get done here. We need to reauthorize our nation's highway and infrastructure systems. We need to save college students and recent graduates from student loan increases, interest rates that are 2 days away from doubling. We need to move forward with the open amendment process and finish considering appropriation bills to fund our transportation and housing programs. It's a lot to get done in 2 days, and frankly, if we didn't put time limit on today's contempt debate, we could spend days on end talking about nothing but this one issue. But beyond all of that, behind floor schedules and expiring authorizations, we're left with this truth. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was shot on December 14, 2010, and died of those injuries the next day. His family's been looking for answers about what led up to this and caused his death for over a year and a half. If we can do anything to answer those questions, then we cannot and should not do anything to make them wait any longer. Not another month, not another day, not another hour. Today, the House of Representatives is going to do what we can to get those answers for the Terry family. Thanks to whistleblowers at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, members of Congress were alerted to the fact that Agent Terry was killed by guns, AK-47 assault rifles, specifically, that our government allowed to walk into Mexico. When confronted with these claims, the Justice Department denied the whistleblowers' claims. What we now know all too well is that just how right the whistleblowers were. However, it took the Department of Justice 10 months from their first denial, almost a year after Border Patrol agent Brian Terry's death, to formally retract the denial about their reckless program that contributed to the deaths of Agent Terry and hundreds of Mexican citizens. You know, I was a cop for almost 40 years and a sheriff for the last 10. As the head of a law enforcement agency, you have two options to make when you make a mistake. You can hope it doesn't come out, and if it does, you're going to lock down and deny, deny, deny. Or you can go out in front of it and admit you made a mistake, tell the American people you're going to investigate, and then do everything to make sure this never happens again. As sheriff, I found it was my moral imperative to always admit when we're wrong, hold folks accountable, make my agency better so we wouldn't make the same mistake twice. It's a responsible thing to do, and it takes away any sting of a possibility of a cover-up. That's not what DOJ did. They've gone the other route: hide, deny, and stonewall. They sent a letter with false information to Congress. The institution is constitutionally mandated with government oversight, and it took them 10 months to retract that statement. It appears that in those 10 months lying and admitting the truth, members of DOJ and the ATF colluded to intentionally cover up what happened. What we're trying to figure out is if there really was a cover-up, and we need the information to determine the facts. Yesterday at the Rules Committee, a couple of people mentioned President Nixon and Watergate, and I agree. This is like the Watergate scandal, but President Nixon didn't leave office because of the scandal itself. He was forced to resign because of the cover-up. I said it last night, and I'm willing to bet Attorney General Holder didn't know all the specifics about what was happening with Fast and Furious. But when the facts started coming to light and congressional investigators started looking for answers, he repeatedly kept us from getting information we need. And that has kept the Terry family from getting the closure they need. Attorney General Holder is responsible for his agency, but he's essentially given his top leadership a free pass. Mr. Speaker, a law enforcement officer who was employed by the United States federal government is dead. Somebody knows what happened to the result of his death, and the Justice Department now and President Obama are refusing to release that information to Congress, to the American public, and to Agent Terry's family. This institution has a duty to oversee the executive branch and to find out what happened. The answers are there. Attorney General Holder knows the answers are there because he's the one who has the documents that contain the answers we're looking for. He's the gatekeeper here, and if he won't give us the information this institution needs to do our duty, our constitutional duty, then we will use every legal and constitutional tool that we have to get to it. I've heard some people say this is all about politics. In my heart, it's just the opposite. It couldn't be further from the truth. These contempt charges aren't about politics. They aren't about Attorney General Holder or the President Obama or anything else but this. A man died serving his country, and we have a right to know what the federal government's hand was in that. It's clear this country somehow played a role in his death. We need to root it out, find the cause, and make sure this never, ever happens again. These votes today aren't about politics. They're about answers that, at the very least, this country owes Agent Terry and his family. President Obama promised his would be the most open administration in history. When discussing executive privilege in the past, Attorney General Holder has made it clear that DOJ won't invoke state secrets privilege to conceal violations of the law or administrative error, avoid embarrassment, or to prevent or delay the release of information. Unfortunately, that is exactly what's happened so far with Fast and Furious. It is for this reason why the House today sees no other choice than to charge Attorney General Eric Holder with both civil and criminal contempt of Congress charges. I'm going to support both of these resolutions. Mr. Speaker, it's not about that it's the political thing to do. It's not because it's the easy thing to do, but it's because it's the right thing to do. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Florida, my friend Mr. Nugent, for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is a sad and deeply troubling day for this House of Representatives. The Republican leadership of this body is asking us to take the unprecedented and unjustified step of holding a sitting Attorney General in contempt of Congress. They are doing so based on a completely partisan, quote, investigation. This is a witch hunt, pure and simple, Mr. Speaker, and it has no place in this House. Eric Holder is a good and decent and honorable public servant. He has reinvigorated the Justice Department, especially on efforts to stop partisan voter suppression across the country. I find it interesting that the Republican leadership has scheduled this nonsense for the floor today, when it is certain to be buried under the avalanche of news in reaction to the Supreme Court's health care decision and the highway bill and the student loan bill and everything else. Is it possible that the Republican leadership doesn't really want the American people seeing what the House is doing today? Why else would they feel the need to rush this to the floor a mere week after the House Oversight Committee voted along strictly partisan lines to adopt the Republican contempt citation? Let me say at the outset that there are certain things that all of us, Democrats and Republicans alike, agree on. We all agree that the death of Agent Terry was a terrible tragedy. We all agree that the ATF field office's embrace of gun walking, which began under the Bush administration, by the way, was a terrible idea. We all agree that the ATF should not have sent an erroneous letter to Senator Grassley in 2011. But the contempt resolution before us doesn't have anything to do with any of that. The Department of Justice has provided thousands and thousands of documents about gun walking. The Attorney General has testified 9 times. The Department has provided over 1,000 pages of documents about the letter sent to Senator Grassley. So this isn't about getting to the truth. This is about politics. It is about politics. This is about the Republicans refusing to take yes for an answer. This is about doing whatever it takes to attack the Obama administration, no matter the issue, no matter the cost. During the committee's, quote, investigation, the Republican majority refused all Democratic requests for witnesses and hearings, as well as requests to interview any Bush administration appointees. All of them were denied. The Republicans refused Democratic requests to hold a hearing with Ken Melson, the head of ATF. You know, if you're actually interested in learning about an ATF operation, don't you think you'd want to talk to the leadership at the ATF? Republicans refused Democratic requests to hold a hearing with former Attorney General Mukasey, who was briefed on botched ATF operations in 2007. If you're actually interested in learning about these botched operations, wouldn't you want to talk to the man who was briefed about them? I would hope that we would all agree that we should never take a step like finding a sitting Attorney General in contempt lightly, and that we should only do so based on accurate information. But Ranking Member Cummings and his staff have found in a very short time 100 concerns, omissions, and inaccuracies in the committee report that is the foundation of this contempt resolution. 100 inaccuracies and omissions and concerns. Sadly, instead of getting answers to those questions, this has been rushed to the floor. Mr. Speaker, the American people expect us to address the issues that matter most to them, issues like jobs and the economy and education and health care. But the Republican majority refuses to listen. Instead, they bring this resolution to the floor, and then they wonder why Congress is so unpopular. What troubles me most, perhaps, is that under this Republican majority, everything has to be a fight. Everything. Everything has to be a confrontation. Everything has to be a showdown. And I get the politics. I understand this is an election year, but this goes way, way too far. It is just wrong. I wish the Speaker of the House would have intervened here and kept this off the floor. By moving forward today on this resolution, we diminish the House of Representatives. This is not a happy day for this institution. I urge my colleagues to reject this rule and the underlying resolutions, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, you know, the gentleman from Massachusetts made a statement. This is about a contempt citation because the Attorney General has not provided all the information the committee has asked for. Out of 140,000 pages by his own testimony from the judiciary, he's given a little over 7,000 pages. That's not reaching out and doing the right thing. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina and fellow Rules Committee member, Mr. Scott.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Nugent, thank you for time. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that my friends on the left need some clarification on why we are here this afternoon. This is not a good day for America, and it is certainly still not a good day for the Terry family. My friends on the left continue to talk about this as if it were a witch hunt. A witch hunt. We have a slain Border Patrol agent, and my friends on the left want to politicize this by talking about a witch hunt, when in fact we all know that this, Mr. Speaker, is about justice. This is about justice. My friend on the left just said that we Republicans refuse to hear yes. We refuse to accept yes as an answer. Well, Mr. Speaker, we want a yes for Kent Terry. We want a yes for Josephine Terry, the parents of Brian Terry. We want a yes for the American people. We want a yes as it relates to the integrity of the process, and we want a yes for justice. And Mr. Speaker, my friends on the left continue to consistently say no. And we are here, Mr. Speaker, for only 2 reasons. The first is because the United States Border Patrol agent Brian Terry is dead because of a federal government operation that allowed American guns to be walked across the border in the hands of drug lords and cartels. We are here today, Mr. Speaker, because the Department of Justice, the Attorney General Eric Holder, and now the President refuses to comply with congressional subpoenas that will give us clarity on these questions, give us clear answers for the Terry family and for the American people. And we have been trying for 18 long months. May I have another minute?
I yield the gentleman another minute.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have been trying for 18 long months to get to the bottom of this issue, and yet we are being stonewalled. And yes, we hear that the federal government has provided 7,000 plus pages. But Mr. Speaker, there are over 100,000 pages that we've requested. And we're talking about a period from February the 4th, 2011 to December 2011, where we were given false information. It is our responsibility, it is our duty to find the truth for the American people and the Terry family. And let me close, Mr. Speaker, by simply saying that how are we supposed to protect and ensure the safety of our Border Patrol agents in the future if we do not know who allowed the guns to walk across the border? How are we supposed to give Brian Terry's family any sense of closure? Mr. Speaker, this is why we have no choice but to be here today. The refusal of the Attorney General to provide answers regarding Brian Terry's death leaves us no choice but to be here today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, let me give myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Gentleman from North Carolina. Mr. Speaker, The last time Congress dealt with a contempt resolution was in the case of John Bolton and Harriet Myers. The period of time between when the committee voted out the resolution and before there was floor action was 6 months. And the reason why there was time taken was to make sure that we got it right. This is less than a week. And I'm going to say to my friends on the other side of the aisle that the minority staff has compiled a list of 100 inaccuracies. 100 inaccuracies in the report that was the basis for this contempt resolution. 100. And they're rushing it to the floor. So don't tell me this is not about politics. Don't tell me this is not a witch hunt. It is exactly what it is. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. The gentleman from Massachusetts is absolutely correct. This is a sad and troubling day. What we see here today, Mr. Speaker, is nothing more than using the halls of Congress for extreme partisan political purposes. This case is all about politically motivated confrontation with the executive branch on a matter that does not even begin to rise to this level. This case is not about gun walking. Those documents have been provided and are not in dispute. The documents at issue are completely unrelated to how gun walking was initiated in Operation Fast and Furious. The department has produced thousands of pages of documents. The committee has interviewed 24 officials, and the Attorney General has testified on 9 occasions. This is an election year witch hunt. I say that to the gentleman from South Carolina. This is an election year witch hunt. During this 16-month investigation, the committee refused all Democratic requests for witnesses and hearings, as well as requests to interview any Bush administration appointees. Never in our nation's history has the House of Representatives voted to hold a sitting Attorney General or a cabinet member in contempt. What's different? I will tell you what's different. It is the simple fact that Republicans have a dogged determination to discredit and defeat this president at all costs. Plain and simple. It's politics. My Republican friends, do not use your majority to engage in a political stunt. The integrity and legacy of this institution deserve better than that. If you want to discredit and defeat this president, you need to leave this floor and leave the C-SPAN cameras and go out and give it your best shot. This is not the place to do it. When the history of this despicable proceeding is recorded, it will be said that your actions were politically motivated to discredit and defeat a president who has worked so hard over the past 3 years. I encourage my colleagues to join me in refusing to vote for this gimmick and walk to the steps of the Capitol and explain the circumstances of this dark day. Do not vote for this resolution. For those of you who choose to vote, I ask that you defeat the rule and vote against these contempt
Gentleman's
resolutions.
time has expired.
I yield back.
Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, you know, it's amazing that my friends forget about history. Because they referenced history in 2008 as related to House Resolution 979 and House Resolution 980. And you know what they did? They passed a rule and said it's hereby adopted. You never even had discussion on the House floor like we're going to do today. Never had debate on the House floor. They just passed it in the Rules Committee and said, guess what? It's hereby adopted. Recognize the gentleman, Mr. Issa, the chairman of Oversight.
For how much time?
I seek unanimous consent to place the statement by the Terry family concerning Congressman Dingell's criticism of the contempt vote in the record at this time.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Does the gentleman seek to yield further time?
I do. I seek to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Ross.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Today I rise to offer my support to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. In December 2010, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed with a gun that was allowed to walk across the border as a result of Operation Fast and Furious. Mr. Speaker, some, including this Attorney General, and some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle state that this operation began in a previous administration. This is demonstrably false, and nothing could be further from the truth. While there was a program under the previous administration known as Wide Receiver, the differences are quite stark. Under Wide Receiver, weapons were tracked, the Mexican government was involved, and no one died as a result of that operation. In fact, Operation Wide Receiver ended in late 2007, nearly 2 years before Fast and Furious began and nearly 9 months before this president was sworn into office. Fast and Furious allowed guns to walk across the Mexican border with no tracking, no involvement by Mexican officials. Over 2,000 firearms disappeared across the border under this failed operation. Hundreds of Mexicans are dead because of this failed operation. An American hero and United States Marine, Agent Brian Terry, is dead because of this failed operation. Agent Terry stood his ground and told moms and dads across America that no one would hurt their children on his watch. He stood up and took that responsibility. To this day, and I mean no one in this administration has had the guts to stand up and say, it was my fault. Attorney General Holder has refused to comply with a congressional subpoena that was issued in October of 2011. I was a practicing attorney in the real world before I came to Congress. In the real world, Americans are expected to comply with subpoenas. Is the Attorney General any different? No, he is not. Are we just supposed to take Mr. Holder's word that we have all the information? That may be how Washington works, Mr. Attorney General, but that is not how Main Street works. Mr. Attorney General, what are you hiding? What are you hiding from the Brian Terry family? What are you hiding from the American public? I've said it before and I will say it again. You can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility. Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General can stonewall all he wants. The Attorney General can misremember all he wants. But whether he likes it or not, today responsibility will land on his desk. Mr. Speaker, I applaud Chairman Issa for his steadfast leadership in the pursuit of the truth. I applaud my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are putting the search of truth before party. Request 15 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I yield another 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I applaud all of those, like Agent Terry, who wear the uniform of the armed forces or stand on the border and guard our nation. Agent Terry knew a thing or two about duty. He died while on duty. It is now the duty of this Congress to hold those responsible and accountable for this failed operation. We will not forget, and we will always stand with you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Once again, members are advised to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, my friend from Florida, Mr. Nugent, talked about obstructionism, and I want to say a couple of words about that because I think this whole process has obstructed justice. You know, during the committee's 16-month investigation, the committee refused all Democratic requests for witnesses and hearings, which is unprecedented. For instance, the committee refused to hold a public hearing with Ken Melson, the head of ATF, the agency responsible for this operation, after he told committee investigators privately that he never informed senior department officials about gun walking because he was unaware of it. The committee also refused a hearing or even a private meeting with former Attorney General Mukasey, who was briefed on botched efforts to coordinate interdictions with Mexico in 2007 and was informed directly that these efforts would be expanded during his tenure. Refused the opportunity to have the Attorney General as a witness. Mr. Speaker, this partisanship was demonstrated by the committee's vote along strictly partisan lines to hold the Attorney General in contempt and to vote along strictly partisan lines on every amendment. This is about politics. This is not about the truth. This is not about justice. This is about politics, and that is why this is such a sad day for this institution. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh.
Gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Massachusetts. Mr. Speaker, the investigation that's being conducted by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is a legitimate investigation. But the recommendation to this House to hold the Attorney General in contempt is reckless, irresponsible, unnecessary, and will actually get in the way of the pursuit of truth. Why do I say that? If you're going to do an investigation, you have to begin at the beginning. In the beginning of Fast and Furious and gun walking began in the Bush administration. There's no evidence that President Bush was aware of it. There's some questions about what his Attorney General knew what and when. But if you are sincerely interested in trying to find out what happened, how in the world do you not begin at the beginning? And despite that fact, the request of many of us on the committee who support an investigation, who support the use of a subpoena, who support the aggressive right of Congress to get access to documents that it needs, have been denied the opportunity to bring in witnesses about what happened and how it happened during the Bush administration. We've been denied the opportunity to bring in Attorney General McCasey. Despite the fact that there was evidence that he was personally briefed on the botched efforts to coordinate interdiction with Mexican authorities. And then Attorney General McCasey was also told that the ATF field office in Phoenix planned to expand these operations during his tenure. So our question really quite simply is, begin at the beginning. That foundation of an open and exhaustive search is what this committee owes, the Committee on Government Reform owes to this House of Representatives before it asks the members of this House to vote on the extraordinary measure of finding a sitting Attorney General in contempt. Secondly, we've got to do our job with care. The original subpoena that went out and was there until the Friday before the Wednesday in which we voted was demanding that the Attorney General turn over documents it would have been illegal for him to turn over. Transcripts of the grand jury, 15 seconds.
The gentleman, additional 15 seconds.
Gentleman's granted an additional 15 seconds.
Transcripts of the grand jury, transcripts of wiretap applications, which is not only a violation of the U.S. Code, but would jeopardize law enforcement officials if that word got out. That is irresponsible, over a broad subpoena. So bottom line, let the investigation continue, but let's acknowledge that the job that the committee needs to do before it asks for a vote of contempt has not been done. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Judge Poe.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, we are here today because of an ill-conceived, dangerous, illegal gun-running scheme called Operation Fast and Furious. This operation has resulted in the death of at least one, maybe two federal agents, and in the death of hundreds of Mexican nationals. Yet we still cannot get a straight answer from the Justice Department as to what happened. The Attorney General says he doesn't know who authorized this nonsense, but he won't let Congress help him find out the facts. In December of last year, Attorney General Holder testified before the House Judiciary Committee and told me that Operation Fast and Furious was flawed and reckless, and that it was probably true more people are going to die. Now, isn't that lovely? Why is the Attorney General being so obstinate? After months of delay, today is the day of reckoning. This administration claims to be the most transparent administration in history. So why won't the administration let the American people know what happened during Fast and Furious? What are they hiding? This contempt resolution is about one thing. It's about finding out how such a stealth and dangerous operation could ever be authorized by the government of the United States. Why would our government help smuggle guns to our neighbor and put them in the hands of the enemy of Mexico and the United States, the violent drug cartels? And no wonder the Attorney General of Mexico wants those in the United States who are responsible to be extradited to Mexico and tried for those possible crimes. Mexico is more interested in Fast and Furious than our own government. As a former judge, I can tell you that contempt is used as a last resort to let individuals know they will comply with a lawful order whether they like it or not. Even the Attorney General cannot evade the law. Time for America to find out the truth about gun smuggling to Mexico. Time for a little transparency. Today is Judgment Day, and that's just the way it is.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, let me remind my friend that this gun walking program started under President Bush, and that's just the way it is. And I'd like to yield 15 seconds to the gentleman from Texas.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm from Texas, and we believe it's our constitutional right to own every gun that was ever made, and we don't want to export them to anywhere. But this resolution is pure politics, and I ask unanimous consent to place my statement in opposition to the record.
Without objection. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida and a former law enforcement officer who lost her husband in the line of duty in Florida.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to come to you from a different angle, one of a law enforcement officer. I served over 17 years as a law enforcement officer. I worked many undercover operations. And as a law enforcement officer, we knew you don't give guns to bad guys. The drug cartels, they're bad guys. You know, if you let a gun walk with a bad guy, you're going to see that gun, whether it's at a crime scene or you're going to be looking down the barrel of it. So when the Attorney General came to our committee, I asked him, who approved this operation? Why was it approved? And he said he just wouldn't answer. He didn't know. Okay, well, what rises to the level of the Attorney General if an international operation that allows guns to walk to another country and are used to kill one of our agents and used to kill and maim their citizens doesn't rise to his level of approval? Who approved it? This is something that is just normal procedures in a law enforcement agency, in any operation. So now you have an Attorney General who won't tell us or can't tell us who approved this international operation. You have others saying, well, this is something that started under another administration. Well, it didn't. That was a different operation that they realized they couldn't keep up with those guns, so they stopped it. And this one started, it was flawed from the beginning. The Attorney General said it was flawed from the beginning, and yet we still have no answers. We don't have answers, the American people don't have answers, and most importantly, the Terry family doesn't have answers, and that's just unacceptable. Let me just say this. I've heard from the other side of the aisle and from my colleagues here today that this is political. This isn't political. To me, it's personal. We have a law enforcement officer doing his job who was killed by a flawed operation that no one will take ownership of in the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General himself won't tell us what rises to the level of his knowing what's going on in his agency if an international operation does not. So I would tell you this. It was not political when I started looking into this, and when we started looking into it, it is not political today. And the way that it became political was when it was asserted right before the gavel dropped in the committee, an executive privilege.
Yield an additional 15 seconds if you'd like.
Gentlelady is recognized for an additional 15 seconds.
I ask you today to approve this resolution. Bring some credibility back to our Department of Justice. This Department of Justice, if it had happened in another agency throughout this nation, and one of our officers had died and the Department of Justice was involved in the investigation, they would be asking for the same documents that we are asking for.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, let me just say to the gentlelady that if she's interested in why the United States pursued this gun walking program, she should talk to the Attorney General under the Bush administration, Attorney General McCasey, where this thing started 5 years ago. And unfortunately, notwithstanding the fact that the Democrats have asked that he be called before the committee, their requests have been denied.
Will the gentleman yield?
She wants to know why this is political. Every single witness that the Democrats asked to be brought before the committee were denied. Every single witness.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not. That is unprecedented in this House, in any committee. And the fact that the Democrats have been locked out of having any of their witnesses come forward, this is not about gun walking. This is not about finding the terrible truth about what happened to Agent Terry. This is about politics, plain and simple, and it diminishes this House. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Holmes-Norton.
Gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Any doubt that today's contempt resolution is political was put to rest when the NRA joined in to blowtorch vulnerable Democrats to vote for contempt today. The gun lobby is directly responsible for the gap in federal law that allowed straw purchases of guns here that were sold in Mexico and ultimately for the tragic death of a border agent. Yet our committee spent no time on the root cause of the tragedy because of a political mandate from the gun lobby. Instead, after the majority failed to get documents it requested under court seal and documents related to ongoing investigations, it asked for internal communications that no Republican or Democratic administration has ever given up. Instead of sparing no effort to give law enforcement the tools they must have to protect our border agents, our committee has spared no effort to get to today's contempt resolution over issues unrelated to the tragic killing. After 16 months, the committee found no evidence that the Attorney General or other top Justice Department officials knew about the ATF gunwalking, and the committee resolutely refused to hear from top ATF officials who said that they in turn had given the Justice Department no such information. It is Attorney General Holder who stopped the gunwalking, authorized and started by the Bush administration. The contempt today, Mr. Speaker, is for the truth. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to make it very clear, the House Rules, Article 11, talk about specifically J1 as it relates to the rights of the minority. But you have to ask for that, as a majority of the minority have to ask for it, and it has to be focused on the issue at hand. They were talking about issues as related to gun ownership. And that was not germane to that issue. And so with that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Quayle.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, today's vote is long overdue. For months, my colleagues and I have worked to uncover the truth about Operation Fast and Furious, which cost the life of Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry in my home state of Arizona. Congressional efforts to get to the bottom of this tragedy and bring accountability to those responsible were met with derision by Attorney General Holder. At hearings when we questioned, Mr. Holder evaded. When we requested documents, he obfuscated. When I questioned Mr. Holder on June 8th, he looked me in the eye and stated plainly that there was nothing whatsoever in the wiretap applications that suggested the existence of a gun-walking program. Yet all I had to do was review those same applications to see that what the Attorney General had said to me, my colleagues, and to the American people was nothing but a bold-faced lie. Mr. Speaker, I will repeat that again. It was a bold-faced lie. Today, let Congress's vote be a signal to Mr. Holder that dishonesty on the part of the administration officials will never be tolerated. Today, let this vote be a signal to President Obama that the security of the American people must always come, but for his own job security and the job security of his cabinet officials. Let this vote be a reminder to Mr. Holder and to President Obama that despite their executive overreach, there are in fact 3 co-equal branches of government. Let this vote demonstrate that Congress has not forgotten its right or its responsibility to provide oversight and to bring accountability. I urge my colleagues to support the rule and the underlying resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Florida, Mr. Nugent, mentioned the issue of gun ownership and as related to the witnesses that the Democrats wanted to have appear before the committee. How inviting the head of the ATF, which is responsible for this, the Operation Fast and Furious, or inviting the former Attorney General who was briefed on gun walking and knew about it, how that has anything to do with gun ownership? What that has to do with, Mr. Speaker, is getting to the truth.
The minority
getting to the truth.
For that?
And the minority has submitted a request for witnesses in writing. and even requested for which I guess they have the right to do, a day of minority witnesses, which they were told that they would not be granted that day in a timely fashion. So this is about politics. This by all measures is about politics. And again, the fact that we are doing this today, I think, diminishes the House of Representatives. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized.
Every member of this chamber wants to get to the bottom of the issue of the tragic death of Officer Terry. And every member of the chamber wants to find out how the ATF and Justice Department were run as related to that tragedy. So the committee that's looking into this refused to hear the testimony of the person running the ATF. And the committee that's looking into this refused to hear the testimony of the Assistant Attorney General, who was responsible for the ATF and talked about this with Attorney General Holder. The committee that is responsible for this received thousands of pages of documents from the Attorney General to try to get to the bottom of the matter. This procedure does violence to the American Constitution. Yes, we have 3 separate branches. Those branches are designed to respect each other's prerogatives. Those branches are designed to avoid a constitutional confrontation and engage in one only when necessary. In the 225-year history of this institution, there has never been a vote like this one before. Never. Is it because the Attorney General didn't turn over documents? He turned over thousands of pages of documents. Is it because the people that know about this issue haven't been made available? To the contrary, the committee refused to hear the testimony of the head of the ATF and the Assistant Attorney General. This procedure diminishes the House. It vandalizes the Constitution. It should not go forward. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Shevitz.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you. The record will reflect that in a bipartisan way, the acting director of the ATF, the person that was actually appointed by President Obama, was deposed by both Democrats and Republicans about a year ago over July 4th, 2 days that he was deposed. That record is there. It is crystal clear. We were also denied by the Department of Justice to speak with Lanny Brewer and Kenneth Blanco, 2 of the key central people at the highest levels of the Department of Justice. So to suggest that we were given an opportunity to talk to them is patently false. And the final point I will make is, you can't complain that the Attorney General Holder was here 9 times between the House and the Senate talking in part about Fast and Furious, and then say that you never had a Democratic witness. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we need to deal with facts in this debate, because this is an important matter. And the gentleman just talked about these hearings, these meetings with the head of the ATF. The reality was that a year ago, Republican staff met with the head of the ATF on July 3rd without notifying Democratic staff. Democratic staff were invited to come on July 4th. There were no public hearings, and no members were there. So again, I'm not sure what the problem is with having the head of the ATF come before the committee so the American people can hear what the truth is and what the facts are. I don't know why that's such a big deal. But to suggest that this was a bipartisan effort is just outright false. Mr. Speaker, this time I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Ms. Edwards.
Gentlelady from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask permission to add my comments to the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the Republican majority is pursuing an unprecedented and a partisan constitutional confrontation today, and it's unnecessary. The contempt resolution that's before the House is both disgraceful and it really is demeaning to this House. It's being brought forth by the other side simply to drag Attorney General Holder through the mud and to publicly accuse him and the administration, and frankly, by extension, the President of the United States, of a cover-up. claiming that our Attorney General was obstructing justice. Republicans even went so far to call him a liar on national television. This is unheard of, it is hyperbolic, and it's disrespectful to the office and disrespectful to this House. The fact that Chairman Issa and Republicans have continuously moved the goalpost and disregarded the good intent and good faith shown by the Attorney General, the Justice Department, and the President's administration. As has been said before, the Department of Justice has provided the Congress with over 7,600 pages of documents and made numerous officials available for testimony. But that's been rebuffed. And just last week, the Attorney General offered to provide even more internal documents and requested a show simply of good faith on the part of the Republican majority that they wanted to resolve the contempt issue, but they've refused, choosing this constitutional confrontation instead. And that's because the Republicans, to be clear, are not interested in a resolution. They're not looking to compromise. They're only looking to score political points at the expense of the integrity of the House and the good name of the President and the Attorney General. And so I would ask us to carefully consider what we're doing here today and to raise into question what we're doing to this House, to the institution, and to the presidency. And I would ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to ask themselves whether the American people want us to focus on their business, to focus on the business of moving the country forward, or to simply play politics because you can't win any other way. And it's a really simple proposition that's in front of us today. And I would say to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, it is time for us to simply walk away from the nonsense that is not doing justice to the American people. And with that, I yield.
Time has expired. Gentleman from Florida.
I'd like to inquire how much time is...
The gentleman from Florida has 9½ minutes remaining. The gentleman from Massachusetts has 10 minutes remaining.
I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise in strong opposition to this resolution. What began as a legitimate investigation into an operation called Fast and Furious has unfortunately degenerated into yet another partisan political attack in an election year. And it's a shame this has taken place for many reasons. First and foremost, because the American people have a legitimate interest in getting to the bottom of the gun violence that spills across our border, of the tens of thousands of weapons made in America that end up in the hands of the cartels. But instead of looking into this investigation, instead of finding out what we can do about this gun violence, this has now become a fight over documents, a fight that is completely unnecessary and unjustified. The very documents that are at issue in this resolution were created after this operation had long since been shut down. They will shed no light on the operation. They will shed no light on what we can do to stop this gun trafficking. But then that's not the goal. The goal here is simply the fight. The Justice Department has bent over backwards, produced thousands of documents. The Attorney General has testified 8 or 9 times before the House, has made every effort to cooperate in this investigation, but the committee will not take yes for an answer because that's not the goal. The fight is the goal. And so we are here when we should be doing the nation's business, when we should be working on legislation to create jobs. Instead, we are here in what is nothing less than a partisan brawl over nothing. And you know how this will end? It will end months or years from now with a settlement in federal district court in which the Justice Department will provide the very same documents they have already offered to provide. But we will have wasted our time, we will have wasted our money, and we have wasted the precious opportunity to get the people's business done here in the House. In case the majority hasn't noticed, we are in the midst of a very difficult economy where people are struggling to find work. They're not struggling to find another partisan fight on the House floor. This is something that cried out for resolution, but those cries were ignored. I urge a no vote.
Gentleman's time has expired. Does the gentleman from Florida reserve?
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chaffetz.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason I'm so passionate about this issue is that it's about openness, it's about transparency, it's about the idea that there is no one person in our government that's above the law. That when you have a duly issued subpoena, you comply with that subpoena. In fact, I'd like to hearken back to the remarks by President Obama as he took office. He said, quote, "Let me say it as simply as I can. Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency. I will also hold myself as president to a new standard of openness. But the mere fact that you have legal power to keep something secret does not mean you should always use it." He went on to say, "I expect members of my administration not simply to live up to the letter, but also the spirit of this law." He went on to send something to all of the department heads. He said, quote, "Government should not keep information confidential merely because public officials might be embarrassed by disclosure, because errors or failures might be revealed, or because of speculative or abstract fears," end quote. The president further said, quote, "There may be a situation here in which a serious mistake was made, and if that's the case, we'll find out and we'll hold somebody accountable," end quote, relating to Fast and Furious. We have a dead Border Patrol agent. We have over 200 dead Mexican people. We have a program that the Attorney General called as fundamentally flawed. We have thousands of weapons that are missing. We have a duty, an obligation to pursue this to the fullest extent and to make sure that we have all those documents so we can make sure that it's never, ever happens again. Now, there are 140,000 documents, according to the Attorney General, that deal with Fast and Furious. We've been given less than 8,000 of those. Less than 8,000 of those. We deserve to have that. I would also, under general leave, I will be leaving this statement from the National Border Patrol Council. This is the AFL-CIO-oriented organization, 17,000 Border Patrol members who call for the resignation of Attorney General Holder. In fact, they say that a slap in the face to all Border Patrol agents who serve this country, an utter failure of leadership at the highest levels of government. If Eric Holder were a Border Patrol agent, not the Attorney General, he would have long ago been found unsuitable for government employment and terminated. These are from the people on the front line. We have an obligation to get to the bottom of this. I yield back.
Goes back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Myself 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 15 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, if this is about openness, then why does the committee have secret meetings where they lock Democrats out? If this is about openness, why won't they let any Democratic witnesses appear before the committee? And since there seems to be some confusion as to whether or not Democrats actually formally requested witnesses, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record a letter to the Honorable Darrell Issa on October 28th, on November 4th, on February 2nd, requesting witnesses including the Attorney General, former Attorney General McCasey, and Mr. Melson, the head of the ATF.
Will the gentleman yield
this
to
one, I'd like to
that?
yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia,
Will the gentleman
Mr.
yield?
Johnson.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we need to understand that there are two types of documents that, or two classes of documents. The ones that relate to pending criminal investigations. Those are not discoverable or cannot be distributed outside of the Justice Department under penalty of U.S. law. You can get 5 years for doing that. You can't expect the Attorney General to turn those over. The other class of documents, internal communications. There may be some whiff of discoverable information in those, but they're covered by executive privilege, and you really don't know why the Attorney General has invoked executive privilege on those issues, but we have to trust the fact that there's good reason for that to be the case. Now, when you compare what has gone on today and over the last 7 days with what happened the day that President Obama was sworn in, you can understand why they're doing what they're doing today. You see, not very long after President Obama was sworn in, we got word that Mitch McConnell said that his mission was to make President Obama a one-term president. And then we know that later on that afternoon, later that evening, when everyone else was enjoying themselves at the presidential balls, there was a group of congresspeople, leadership in the Republican Party, that were scheming on how they were going to disrupt and say no and obstruct everything that this president put forth. And so they have done that. They have done everything they can to make this president look bad. This is a manufactured crisis. It has no legal substance whatsoever. This is just simply a cheap political stunt to bring disfavor upon the President of the United States, and I ask my colleagues to not let us sink to this level. The first time in history that any cabinet member has been found in contempt of court.
Time has
This
expired.
is truly saddening, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lankford.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for
Mr.
1.5 minutes.
I would have to concur. This is an incredibly sad day. This administration that started talking about transparency has now sunk to the level of actually concealing documents. Never has an attorney general been held in contempt of Congress because every other attorney general has turned over documents to Congress when they were requested. This attorney general has not. Now just compare this whole controversy on the Secret Service scandal from several months ago. They put everything out, released all the documents, walked through it, it was done. The GSA scandal, released all the documents, held people accountable, it was done. ATF, even when we started this investigation a year and a half ago, put all their documents out, put all their people out, done. As soon as we get to the Department of Justice, it's slow, it's delay, it's delay, it's delay. The question is why? Why this matters that we get to the Department of Justice in the documents is because in Phoenix office, everything was organized in the Phoenix office, then was approved by the U.S. Attorney in the Phoenix area, and then went to the Department of Justice. Not to the head of ATF, but to the Department of Justice, to DOJ in their leadership to be approved. It is essential that we know what was done there and who did it in the process. So this is not some ancillary thing that's added to it. This is an important part of this process. Now, there's all this obfuscation to say it's Bush's fault, this is political, there's not enough witnesses. The essence of this particular contempt deals with the documents that on February the 4th of last year, the Department of Justice sent us a letter that said they had no idea about this, and then by December, after all year long saying, no, we didn't know, we didn't know, we didn't know, come back in December and say, oops, we did. Okay, it is what Eric Holder has called to us his evolving truth. We want to know the facts of how it started here and went here. There's 130,000 documents that they say they have. They've turned over a little over 7,000 of those documents. That is not the prerogative for them to continue to hold and conceal those documents. Fast and Furious has moved to slow and
Yield
tedious.
additional 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 15 seconds.
Fast and Furious has moved to slow and tedious. We have got to have those documents to be able to finish up this investigation. It should have long since been done. Eric Holder told our chairman that he has these documents, but he's using the documents as a bargaining chip to get a better deal. That is not the prerogative when we have a subpoena. We are not looking for some conflict with the administration. We're looking to get to the facts. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fattah.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 90 seconds.
I thank the gentleman. I served for many years on the Government Oversight and Reform Committee. I've been involved in a lot of these investigations over time. I served for many years on the House Ethics Committee. The Congress should be embarrassed about the conduct of this investigation and the charade that brings us to the floor today. The Attorney General can't provide these documents. The President has protected them under executive order, under executive privilege, which means that the person who works for the President can't provide them to the Congress. We all know that. So to take a decent man who served his country in almost every capacity as a military veteran, as a U.S. attorney here in D.C., as a judge, and to drag his name wrongfully before this House, this majority, which clearly has lost its way. Their pursuit of power, they've lost all sense of principle. This is a disgraceful act, but we will get through it. We are a big country, and the American people will recognize the disservice that the Republican majority brings to this floor today. And I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day whether we couldn't even find this Congress held in more contempt than it is now. I think we're at 9% approval. That's because of the actions of this majority, and the public will have to take account of that as we go forward. I thank the gentleman.
Gentleman from Florida.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Spear, 2 minutes.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I thank the gentleman from Massachusetts. You know, this should be labeled fast and foolish, or maybe fast and fake. We are not talking about gun walking here. We are doing nothing to help the family of Brian Terry recover. What we're talking about are inter-office emails between the administration executives in the AG's office. I want everyone here to be willing to turn over all of their inter-office emails. But more importantly, let's talk about whether there's precedence for the assertion of executive privilege. And let me just point to a number of cases when executive privilege was asserted for non-involved presidential communications. In 1981, October, President Reagan asserted executive privilege over internal deliberations within the Department of Interior concerning, interestingly enough, Mineral Lands Leasing Act. On October 1982, President Reagan asserted executive privilege over internal EPA files concerning Superfund provisions. On July 1986, President Reagan asserted executive privilege over documents written by William Rehnquist when he was the head of the OLC at DOJ. On August 1991, President George H.W. Bush asserted executive privilege over an internal Defense Department memorandum regarding an aircraft development contract. December 2011, President George W. Bush asserted executive privilege over internal Justice Department materials relating to prosecutorial decision-making. It has been done many times before by Republican presidents. What we are doing here is a travesty to this institution and to this country. I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, can I inquire for the gentleman from Florida how many more speakers he has? Because we have no more speakers on this side but myself.
We have no more speakers.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 1/4 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, there isn't a single person in this House who doesn't honor the service of Agent Terry. There isn't a single person in this House who does not want justice for the Agent Terry's family and the truth. There isn't a single person in this House, I believe, who doesn't want to get to the bottom of how gun walking started and how these operations were so terribly botched. But every single attempt for an even-handed investigation has been thwarted by the Republican majority. There has not been an even-handed investigation. Every single witness that the Democrats requested to be called before the committee, they were refused. Every single witness. It's unprecedented. Let me say that Eric Holder is a good and decent and honorable man. He's doing an excellent job as Attorney General. He does not deserve this. And this institution does not deserve this. I said to my friends on the other side of the aisle, do you really want to go down this road? This is a race to the bottom. This is a race to the bottom. This is a witch hunt. This is politics, pure and simple. It diminishes this House of Representatives. We are better than this. Does everything have to be a confrontation? Does everything have to be in your face? Now, I get it. You want to maintain your majority. I get it. You want to win elections. That's understandable. But at what cost? Do we really need to drag the House of Representatives down this road? I mean, this is a stain on this House of Representatives. We should not be here today. We should be talking about jobs and putting people back to work and about making sure student loans don't double. But instead, we are doing this. This is so political and so blatantly partisan that I think the American people are sickened by this. And as a number of people have said, you want to know why the approval rating of Congress is so low? You know, watch the videotape of this debate here today. We should be doing the people's business. This is not the people's business. This is not about getting to the truth in the case of Agent Terry. This is a political maneuver to go after this administration. And this has unfortunately become a trend and a pattern in this Congress. You know, we need to find a way to solve our problems without always having these big confrontations. So I urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you know, don't go down this road. Now, we urged the Speaker of the House yesterday to pull this from the floor. This is wrong. Please defeat this rule.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, this is about Agent Terry, who gave his life for this country. This is about what this government has done, not to expose the truth, but to block the truth. This is about calling on the Attorney General to follow the Constitution. This is about us following Article 1 of the Constitution in regards to our ability to have oversight. You know, I hear this stuff about witch hunt and about politics. and it gets me sick. Because I will tell you this, as a former law enforcement officer, we should be more worried about what lousy policies that Attorney General Holder is covering up that caused the death of one of our own in protecting this country. That's what this is all about. This is about holding people accountable. You know, I hear a lot of things down here, but the rule of law. You know, when I was subpoenaed as a sheriff, we complied with the subpoena. Now, I understand that the Attorney General feels that he's above the law in regards to the subpoena. And I understand the president's come to protect him. But we talk about this body and what the American people think. How about we do the right thing? That, Mr. Speaker, that we move forward and do the right thing in regards to all the Attorney General has to do is comply with the subpoena. And by saying that he's bent over backwards, I would suggest to you that under 8,000 pages of documents out of 140,000 is not bending over backwards. This is about our constitutional responsibility to provide oversight. This is about our constitutional responsibility to make sure that the federal government stays on track, that these executive branch decisions that are made don't put more Americans at risk. Nobody seems to care about the 200-plus Mexican nationals that have been killed. Obviously, Mexico cares because they want to indict those that were responsible for coming up with this failed idea. This is about Congress doing its constitutional responsibility, holding hearings to find out what happened. And when the federal government or branches of the federal government stand in the way and obstruct, that's not the right thing to do. My friends on the other side of the aisle should be more concerned that the Attorney General has said to Congress, guess what? You don't matter. Congress does matter. Congress has a constitutional responsibility, Mr. Speaker, to do just that, to have oversight over the executive branch. And merely the subpoena is a tool to allow us to do that. And unfortunately, this Attorney General feels that he doesn't have to comply. I beg to differ. I think the American people, but more than that, the family of Officer Terry deserve to know what transpired and what the end of this is. And I think that we should be protecting those law enforcement officers that are out there today in the United States of America that are going to be facing these same guns that were walked during Fast and Furious. If you read the transcripts, hundreds of guns walked. Some were recovered in the United States, and unfortunately some have been recovered in Mexico and have led to deaths in Mexico. One has to wonder how many of those guns are going to lead to deaths here in America. You know, when I raised my hand along with everybody else, it was to support and defend the Constitution. When I raised my hand as a sheriff, it was to support and defend the Constitution. And when Officer Terry raised his hand, it was to support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. We owe it to all of our law enforcement officers, federal law enforcement officers in particular, on this issue, to make sure that they're protected. And to all our local law enforcement officers who are going to be the first line of defense on the streets of this city and counties. They have a right to know what this Attorney General's office has done and the leadership has done, not giving people a free pass because it's expedient to do. And, you know, we really don't want to hear what the absolute facts are. Let's just push the facts aside. Those on the other side of the aisle really don't want to talk about the facts. They want to talk about things that, you know, it's a witch hunt or it's politics. The facts are clear. Officer Terry's dead. Officer Terry died because weapons were allowed to walk from the United States under the nose of ATF and under the nose of the Attorney General's office through an OCDF case. That's the facts. I would suggest that we should find out how did that come to pass, and then in regards to what was transpired and sent to Congress and members of Congress about the fact that it didn't really occur, and then 10 months later, oh, by the way, you know, that memo we sent wasn't correct. We did, in fact, allow guns to walk. We've put law enforcement officers in the United States of America at risk because this federal government had a botched idea and a bad idea. And with that, I yield back to balance my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to.
Speaker, on that, I ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman ask for yeas and nays?
Yes. 8 yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on House Resolution 708 will be followed by 5-minute votes on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 4251 if ordered and H.R. 4005 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote. Yeas are 253, the nays are 172.
Mr. Hinojosa votes no. Mr. Platts. Mr. Platts votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 254, the nays are 173. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is on the question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 4251 as amended, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar Number 369, H.R. 4251, a bill to authorize, enhance, and reform certain port security programs through increased efficiency and risk-based coordination within the Department of Homeland Security and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? So many as in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. This vote, the yeas are 402, the nays are 21, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is a question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 4005 as amended, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar number 352, H.R. 4005, a bill to direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to conduct a study and report to Congress on gaps in port security in the United States and a plan to address them.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? So many as in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative. Gentleman from Arizona.
Speaker, can I ask for nays, yeas and nays, please record a vote.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Both the yeas are 411, the nays are 9, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The House will be in order. Would members please take their conversations from the floor, clear the well and the aisles. You want to take it?